Download this code from codegive.com, link in the description below. Creating a dynamic news web part in SharePoint can enhance your site by allowing users to see relevant news updates. Below is a step-by-step tutorial to help you build a SharePoint framework, spfx, web part that dynamically pulls news articles from a SharePoint list. Prerequisites. Node.js. Ensure you have node.js installed, version 14.x or later. Yeoman. Install Yeoman and the SharePoint framework generator. Gulp. Install Gulp globally. SharePoint Online Tenant. You will need access to a SharePoint Online site. Code editor. Use Visual Studio Code or any other code editor. Step 1. Set up your environment. 1. Open your command line tool, command prompt, PowerShell, or terminal. 2. Install the SharePoint framework Yeoman generator. Bash. npm install g at Microsoft/generator-sharepoint. Step 2. Create a new spfx web part. 1. Navigate to the directory where you want to create your project. 2. Run the Yeoman generator. Bash. Yo at Microsoft/SharePoint. 3. When prompted. Solution name, Dynamic News Web Part. Target for SharePoint, SharePoint Online only, latest. Framework to use, React, or choose another framework if you prefer. Web part name, Dynamic News. Description, a dynamic news web part to display news from a list. Use the default settings for the rest. Step 3. Create a SharePoint list for news. 1. Go to your SharePoint Online site. 2. Create a new list called News with the following columns. Title, single line of text. Description, multiple lines of text. Image, hyperlink or picture. Date and time. Step 4. Implement the web part logic. 1. Open the project in your code editor. 2. Navigate to src/webpart/dynamicnews/components/dynamicnews.tsx. 3. Replace the existing code with the following to fetch and display news articles dynamically. tsx. Import * as React from React. Import styles from ./dynamicnews.module.scss. Import idynamicnewsprops from ./idynamicnewsprops. Import SPHTTP client, SPHTTP client response from @Microsoft/SPHTTP. Interface iNews item. Title, string. Description, string. Image, string. Date, string. Interface iDynamic news state. News items, iNews item. Export default class dynamic news extends React.component iDynamic news props, iDynamic news state. Constructor, props, iDynamic news props. Super, props. This state equals. News items. Public component did mount, void. This _get news items. Private _get news items, void. This .props.sphttp client. .get, $this .props.site URL /API/web/list/get news /items sphttp client.configurations.v1. Then, response, sphttp client response, equals. Return response.json. Then, data, equals. Const news items, iNews item equals data.value.map, item equals. Title, item.title. Description, item.description. Image, item.image. Date, item.date. This set state, news items. Public render, React element I dynamic news props. Return. div class name equals styles.dynamic news. h2 latest news /h2. div class name equals styles.news container. This.state.news items.map, item, index, equals. div key equals index class name equals styles.news item. h3 item.title /h3. imgsrc equals item.image alt equals item.title class name equals styles.news image / p item.description /p. p new date, item.date, to locale date string, /p. /div. 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 Step 5, update the web part properties. 1. Open src /webpart /dynamic news webpart.ts. 2. Add properties for the site URL. TypeScript. Import version from @Microsoft /SP core library. Import base client side webpart from @Microsoft /SP webpart base. Import iDynamic news webpart props from /iDynamic news webpart props. Export default class dynamic news webpart extends base client side webpart iDynamic news webpart props. Protected get data version. Return version.parse, 1.0. Protected get site URL, string. Return this.context.page context.web.absolute URL. Public render, void. Const element, react element iDynamic news props equals react.create element. Dynamic news. SPHTTP client, this.context.SPHTTP client. Site URL, this.site URL. React DOM.render, element, this.DOM-element. Step 6, test your web part. 1. Open your terminal and navigate to your project directory. 2. Run the following command to serve your web part. Bash gulp serve. 3. This will open the SharePoint workbench in your browser. You can add your dynamic news web part to the page. Step 7, deploy the web part. 1. When you are satisfied with your web part, you can package and deploy it. Bash gulp bundle ship. Gulp package solution ship. 2. Upload the generated.sppkg file found in the SharePoint /solution folder to your SharePoint app catalog. 3. Add the web part to a SharePoint page from the web part picker. Conclusion. You have successfully created a dynamic news web part for SharePoint that retrieves and displays news articles from a SharePoint list. You can further customize styling, add error handling, or implement pagination as needed. Feel free to enhance your web part with additional features such as filtering, sorting, or categories for a more robust solution.